Hey YouTube, how's it going? Welcome back to our part 6 of our series multiplayer game with Unity and Node.js. Today we're going to be doing some bullet collisions, typically when the bullet collides with terrain or when the bullet collides with another tank. So we're going to be going over a couple concepts. I'm going to put in some base tile sets and stuff, so if you've never done anything with tile sets or the tile palette before, we're going to go a little bit over that and then just get our bullet collision done. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to go in here, we're going to fire up the server. So I just did my npm start and we have our server started. Cool. And we're going to go from there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a tile palette. Just kind of, our scene's blue right now and we just kind of want something a little different. So if you don't have this little tile palette window, you can go to window and under 2D you can click on tile palette and you can dock it wherever you want. I like it up in the top here, but you can dock wherever you like. So we're going to click create new palette. I'm just going to call this world. You can call it whatever you want, and we're going to go and hit create. Okay, so we're going to be prompt with this little place to put the palette. So I went into assets art. I'm going to create a new folder called palettes. And then inside here, I'm going to create one called world. And then you can either just click it, hit select folder. I like going inside of it so it knows which folder we're going into, and just hit select folder. Okay, so create palette should now turn into world here. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up our art folder here. And we're going to scroll down and we're going to grab all these tiles. So I'm using click once, then I'm going to hold down shift. I'm going to click the last one, the last sand one. And then I'm just going to drag it into this panel. Now you'll start seeing a grid and start seeing a placement. It doesn't really matter where you place it along here, just kind of place it along one of these. And the pop-up window is going to come back up again. Basically, it just wants to know where you want to save it. So we're going to go back into the world folder. We'll select that guy and it's going to do its processing on each asset. So what it does is it just goes through all these assets and it just processes it. Okay, cool. So for this tile set, because we brought it in a random order, it doesn't really make a lot of sense where all the tiles and stuff are. And in the future you would want like a tile set where this would be all the green with like rounded corners and all the sand with rounded corners that transition to the green and something that's laid out super nice. But for our purpose now, we're just gonna use this. So if you don't have the tutorial scene open, make sure you open that. We're gonna right click and we're gonna go down to create empty, and I'll just hit F2 and rename this to tile maps. In the inspector, make sure this is at 0, 0. So click tile maps, make sure it's at 0, 0. Inside tile maps, we're going to go into 2D, and you're going to click in tile map. And it'll probably do like what it just did on me. It'll make a grid here that's outside of it, so make sure you drag the grid into tile maps. And we're given a single tile map. So the way tile maps work is it's just a nice grid of one unit, and based on how you process this each asset, so this says every 128 pixels is one unit. Okay, so if our asset was actually 64 pixels, it would show up this as like half the size, if that makes sense. So it fills up one unit, one square, but if it's not 128 like long and wide, then it won't fill up the square. So this is set up for each one of our tiles. So we can go ahead and rename this tile map. We're just going to call this ground here. And we're going to leave the default order in the layer down to 0. Now when we do make our terrain collision, we're going to change this. So just keep that in mind that we're going to change the order in the layer. And when you get deeper into games, you're going to want to start having sorting layers for like ground, decoration, player, like that sort of stuff that you see here. We're just going to use default for all this tutorial. So, okay, cool. So we're going to leave it at 0. We're going to call this ground. We're going to go back into the tile palette. So the way the tile palette works is you have all these commands up here that do a bunch of different stuff. You can just hover over and figure out what they do. We're going to be using the brush, which is a single paint. You can use the box as well, which does like a nice box selection of painting. And we're going to select one of these tiles. So we're going to select the green one here. And we're just going to color it all green around the thing. And like I said, if you want to select the box here, you can just drag and do that fill. And we'll just get a little fancy. We'll grab this tile here, and we'll do I'm still on the box selection, so we'll do the selection down there. And then where's the other tile? It's up here. We'll do that. Okay. And then we'll just put in some tiles up this way. So the little square here, the little rectangle you can see around this camera, it's like a nice white line. That's your camera preview. So if you were to show in like game, you can see that's all green. So we're just going to kind of go outside the bounds for now. That way in the future, if you want like the camera to follow the player or something, you can do that. You can go crazy on this. Just for this tutorial, we're just going to do something very simplistic, something that's not blue. Okay, so I'll do some sand on each side. And okay, we'll call that done. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do some like collision stuff. So we're going to grab the tree large. So the tree large is like, well, it shows one tile here. It's actually like a 3x3, so just kind of give it some room. And it's going to want to know where to be saved. We'll save it into worlds. And it's going to appear as a single tree, I guess. And you'll see when I go to paint, because we're on the ground layer, it's going to paint into that tile, right? So now I don't have that tile anymore. And so the way that we get around this is by creating more tile maps. So we're going to go to the grid, and we'll right click, and we'll add a new tile map. Because we already have the grid, it's not going to create the grid object for us, it'll just create the tile map this time. And we're going to call this, we'll call this trees. And we're going to go into the inspector, and we're going to change the order in the layer to 1. 0 being the far back, higher numbers being drawn in front. If I was to reorder trees in front of ground, that has no effect. The effect is based on the sorting layer and then sorting number in that layer. So ground is higher than default, decoration is higher than ground, that sort of stuff. And then inside default, based on its ordering 0 to, I'll say, infinite, that will be its hierarchy that it gets drawn in, 0 being first. Okay, so we're going to make sure that you'll now see that because I clicked trees, it's swapped over to the trees layer. Make sure that you are on trees. And you're going to grab the trees, and we're just going to paint. I'm going to use the little box tool here. There we go. And I'm just going to kind of paint trees within kind of the bounds that you can kind of see inside the game, right? So you can see all the trees, right? It's inside the box. It's up to you. You can go outside of it. Like it doesn't matter if it's inside or not. Just for simplicity and seeing in the tutorial, we'll be able to see the collision there. Okay, so now we don't have any collisions. So the way you can add collisions very easily is you can add collisions using a terrain collider. So we're going to add new component. We're going to go tile map collider 2D. And the way this works is this works based on how the game object or the sprite is defined inside the sprite editor. So if I was to show you inside the sprite editor, we could change this to like custom physics outline, and then I could draw like a really weird shape. Like if you wanted like something that was like really defined, you could do that, or I could just do this box and then hit OK, and then now when you go to this, you'll see like the physics and stuff for that collider. Okay, so we just have some base colliders, and the idea is that when something hits it, then it'll get destroyed. Okay, so if I was to start the game up right now, we should see our tank, and our tank moves. And you'll notice that we don't have any tread anymore, and that's because we started introducing graphics. So let's go back to our player prefab here. And I am using a new version of Unity. I'm using 2018.3.11 now. I've upgraded the project. You don't have to upgrade the project, but if you do wish, I am using a newer version of Unity, and this will look a little different. This looks a little different because you're using the old version. Just make sure that you drag and drop this into the scene, edit how we're editing it, make sure you, at the top, click, hit apply, and then remove it from the scene. if you are on a newer version of Unity, you can kind of follow along with what I'm doing now. So we're going to go in and we're going to click the trail. And under trail, there is sorting layer, default. We'll leave it at default. And then sorting order, we're just going to put this to 10. Okay, beautiful. And then I'm going to go back. So that kind of already saves it. Make sure you hit apply if you're on the older version. And the last thing we're going to check is under tile maps. I'm going to make sure that the order in the layer for the trees is set to 1. So ground 0, trees are set to 1. And if I hit play now, when I drive around, I did not save it. What do we got here? Should see it on top. Maybe it's not going. Okay. And we're not going to be running into the terrain. That's going to be totally something different. This is more like the bullets when it's firing is going to hit and destroy, because that's all like server side, and we have to make sure we do that. Okay, cool. So the bullets are still running, and we're just going to pause the scene there. Okay, cool. So we are going to close up the art here, and we're going to create a new folder under code. I'm going to call it gameplay. Okay. Oh, click the wrong scene. It's trying to grab my old scene. Okay, there we go. Okay, so just grabbing my reference here. So we're gonna create a new script. We're gonna make this very generic. We're gonna call this collision destroy. Okay. And we'll open that guy up. And I'm using a newer version of Visual Studio now as well. Like I said before, you can still use the old stuff, it'll be fine. I've just decided to upgrade. Okay, cool. So in our namespace, I'm going to call this gameplay. We'll keep it separated. And let me just open this up. Okay, so that's what we're creating. Okay, so we're going to get rid of our default stuff here. And we're going to bring in a new field we're going to bring in the network identity here. And make sure you're using the project.networking. And we're going to just call this networking identity. And then we're going to have one other field. So this was something that, that I came across when I was building it. And what it was I would fire a bullet from my client, and the second client would tell me the bullet collided with something, and that's because it didn't know that the bullet was fired by me. So it just assumed that the bullet collided with something. So this we're gonna instantiate a class here called whoActivated_me, and this will just be something that's basically when you overlap your bullet over your tank for the few first seconds, half a second, it won't destroy the bullet right away. So we'll just say whoActivated_me, and we'll also have that. So it's gonna appear as like squiggly lines for now, and that's okay. We're just gonna finish writing out this, and then we'll go on to making that class. So we're going to use a built-in function called onCollisionEnter 2D. So 2Ds, because we're using 2D objects, 2D rigid bodies, 2D colliders, that sort of stuff, this function is going to fire the 2D function. If you're using 3D, make sure you use the regular one and use the regular 3D colliders and the regular rigid body. Okay, so we're going to grab our network identity here. And this can be the network identity with who we collided with. So we'll say collision.getComponent.gameObject, and we'll grab the network identity from there. So now we have the ID with who we collided with. Okay, so just for checks, we're gonna say if the network identity is null, then we'll throw a collision. So if I collide with like a wall terrain, there's no reason for my wall terrain to have a network identity, so this is going to come back as null. So if it's null, we basically collide with a wall. And if it's not null, then we're going to get the ID. And we're going to check it against this class. So while we're waiting here, I'm going to go back to Unity. We're going to get a bunch of errors because we are halfway writing a class. Certain things don't exist. You're going to go back to gameplay here. And we're going to create a new class called Who Activated Me. And this is going to be a nice little script that we can just throw on the bullet. We can throw on other objects, whatever you want to do. So we'll go to Who Activated Me here. And we'll make sure we put this into gameplay. And we're going to remove these as well. And it's going to be a very simplistic class. We're just going to have a private string. Bring this over where it needs to be here. And we'll call this Who Activated Me. Lowercase w, so it's different. And we'll make a setter and a getter. So, like I said before, I'm kind of old school and I like setter and getter functions. If you want to use a property, then you can do that. And we're just going to set the Who Activated Me equal to ID. If you also want to use the grayed out attribute that we created here, you can as well. And then that would show in the inspector. And then you could compare if you ever run into errors. And then we'll get activator. Cool. Return Who Activated Me. Cool. And let's just see. Do I have grayed out? There we go. Beautiful. Okay. Well, let's call it grayed out, and then don't think I need to have the network identity there. Let's see. Yeah, I need the serializable field. Okay. So it'll be serializable. Like, it doesn't matter which order, like, the attributes really go in. So serializable field, serialized field. It's going to be a gray out, so you can't really edit it. You can just kind of see it. And then we have a setter and a getter here. Okay, so if we go back to here, we're going to use our get activator. So we're going to compare this network identity that I collided with. So the best example to think of this is we just fired a bullet. The bullet's overlapping our tank, which is going to have a collider, and it's going to be colliding. But if we fire the bullet, we don't want the bullet to destroy. So they're going to get attached with a Who Activated Me. And we're going to use, we got to bring in the class here. Oh, there we go. We'll put a D on the end here as well. So just go ahead and make that change for Who Activated Me, not activate. Here. And then now you should get your IntelliSys. So get activator. So this is going to return an ID, which should match. If these two match, then it's our bullet overlapping our tank that we fired the bullet from. We don't want the bullet to destroy. Cool. So just like any of our commands, we're going to do network identity. We're going to get the socket, and we're going to emit an event to the server. We'll call this collision destroy. And then we'll do a new JSON object, JSON utility. So that's the built-in Unity stuff. We'll go to toJSON, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new one just for like the ID data. And we're going to go ahead and create this right now. You don't have to worry about it. Just kind of follow what I was doing. The new ID data, parentheses, and then open and close, because we're gonna fill this in with the ID. We're gonna say like the ID is equal to the network identity dot get ID. We just have to add it. So if you go back to Unity here, we're gonna just double click, open up network client. If you want to do it from the side here as well, you can. And we are going to, at the bottom, that's it. Okay, so at the bottom, we're gonna add just a nice data class for the ID. So we're gonna call this ID data. So basically, like, we could use the player, we could use bullet data because they all have ID. But I mean, they have like position data, and like that's just extra data we don't need to be sending. So I'll just have like a separate class. It's okay, it's just data. So ID data and then string ID. And if you go back to collision destroy, this now should be green. So if you want to write this after you made that class, that's your call. But basically we're making a JSON object. Inside there's the JSON utility.toJSON. And we're going to toss in a new ID data. In previous things, I've had like a reference to the ID data class that I reuse. This is like a single one-off, so I mean, it's okay. You can either do it that way or you can do it this way. And we're going to say, so when you do the new and you do the class here, if you do the parentheses, you can start setting like public and different variables and properties and stuff inside of it. So I'm going to say ID, and we're going to say that's equal to network identity. So that's this one, not the one we collided with, .get ID here. So there we go. And you don't need the colon, but if you add other properties, you'll need a comma. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so this is going to emit this to our server. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to start setting up a couple collisions here on our game objects, on our bullets, that sort of stuff. So we'll go into the bullets. There we go. And the first thing we're going to attach is we'll start setting up the rigid body stuff. So we're only using the rigid body because you need a rigid body in order to cause collisions, but we're not actually going to be updating the rigid body. We're going to continue doing our positional updates. We're just going to use the rigid body to activate for collisions. And the reason why we're doing this on client side is while we can make like a nice grid and check positional data on the server for stuff, it is a lot easier to just have all the clients just kind of go, hey, you know what, this bullet hit a wall, you should remove it, right? You can do server-side checks in order to validate that. You can do the whole thing on the server if you want, but for ease of use, we're gonna let the clients actually tell us, be like, as like a helper, hey, you know what, the bullet hit the wall, you should kind of destroy it, and then it'll destroy it for everybody. So we're using 2D, so we're going to be using rigid body 2D. We're going to keep it on dynamic. We're going to set the gravity scale to 0, right? We don't want the bullet to fall. And you're going to change collision detection to continuous, because if you have like really tiny walls, you want to like always checking, especially for bullets when they go so fast. If you're doing like a couple hits every couple of seconds, then you can go to discrete, but if not, set it to continuous. And then we're going to do a circle collider 2D, and by default the circle's pretty good. It does a really good job at figuring out how big it has to be. And we'll set that up, and then we're going to start adding our scripts. So the first one we're going to add is who activated me. And you'll see it's nice and grayed out here. And the second one we're going to add is collision destroy. And now it requires who activated me and a network identity. So make sure you set those up. And like I said, if you're on the old version, make sure you drag the bullet into the scene, set this up, click the bullet, click apply in the top right, then delete it from the scene. If you're on the newer one, you can just kind of do where I did, where I just kind of set it up, hit Control S, and we'll leave the scene. Okay, so we're going to go into player prefab now. And we're just going to set up a circle collider 2D on the start of the player prefab object. And like I said before, it does a really good job of figuring out the radius here. If you wanted to go into, like I was showing you on the sprite editor, and make like hitbox around this guy, then you could use you could use like the polygonal collider. It should work for you. Okay, so we'll just set that up. That should work, and we'll go back and. Yeah, so the last thing we need to do is start doing some server stuff. So right now we're sending the commands out to the player, where now we're going to have to start setting commands out to the server. Okay, cool. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of edit the bullet class. There's a couple of new pieces of information that we need to edit and add, and so we'll do that now. So the first one is on the update right now, we just returned false. And if you remember from previous tutorials, we have this check is destroyed. And what we're going to do is we're going to destroy the bullet by setting an is destroyed property And then when this thing returns, it will kind of already remove the bullet for us. So we already have the code for removing the bullet. We just need to call it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a property called this dot is destroyed. And we'll just set that to false for now. And then we're also going to add the activator, which was something that we added in the previous data. So now we have the activator, and we're going to change this false to is destroyed. So this allows us to set the property, and then when it actually goes to do the update on the bullet, it will remove the bullet because we've set it. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so we're going to go into our index.js. We're going to scroll down to between fire bullets and disconnect. I like keeping the disconnect at the bottom, just for ease of use. It's like the last thing that's there. And we're going to set up the socket event. So we're going to say socket.on, and inside here we'll say collision destroy, right? That's the name of the event that we called, was collision destroy. And inside there, we set some data which contain the ID that destroyed. Okay, so first thing we'll do is we'll console log, and we'll say single quotes collision with bullets ID, and we'll say data.id. So that was the property that we were sending, was the ID. So now we're going to do a filtering technique. I'm also going to start using, instead of var, I'm going to start using the let key. It's just a more up-to-date version of what people use for Node. You can keep var and the rest of the stuff, but for now on I'm going to start using the let key instead of var. But it's your choice. So I'm going to use filtering on the array. So I'm going to have, and the way the filtering works, it returns multiple items. Most of the time this will likely just be one item, but just for ease of use, I'm going to say return bullets. Okay, so we're going to search through all our bullets, and we're going to do that by doing bullets.filter. And inside there, we're going to go through each bullet, and we're going to do a check. This is basically a true or false, and if it's true, it gets returned part of this array. So we're going to say return bullet.id, right? So that's what's given to it, to the data.id that we're passing into it. So, right, we're passing in we're saying this bullet needs to be destroyed. It has this ID. We're going to go find that bullet. That's why I said it's only going to return normally one, but for ease of use, you have to assume that it's going to be multiple, just because it could. And we're going to return that. Okay. And then, like I was saying, we will mostly only have one entry, but just in case, loop through all and set to destroy. Okay, so we'll just write the note there just so you remember for next time. So we're going to say returns bullets, and we're going to do a for each on these guys. And the way we can do that is like there, and we're going to pass in, so that will be a bullet. Inside there, we're going to say bullet dot, and now we made that new property is destroyed, and we'll set that to true. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so we're going to fire the collision destroy function. It's going to come in here. It's going to go to the bullet, match it with its ID for what's stored on the server, and it's going to set to it's destroyed. The next time it fires the interval for running through all the bullets, it'll find out it is destroyed, and it'll go through and remove it. Okay, beautiful. So we're almost done. We need a couple more pieces of information. So one of the things we haven't set for the bullet was the activator. So when we create a bullet, we should assume that we are also getting the activator. So the way that happens is through the fire bullet. So we're going to do it on the server, and then we're going to go back and do it on the client. So right here under the bullet name, we're going to set bullet.activator. I'll set this to data.activator. And if you go back to your client code right now, we don't fire that, but we're going to set that up here. And in our return data, we're going to say activator, and we'll say bullets.activator, and we're going to pass it back. So the idea is that when you fire a bullet, we'll attach the network identity to when you fired. It'll come through, it'll set it in the bullet, and then it's going to return it back to the client. So that's not just you, that's you and everybody, right? Because we're broadcasting it. And then this will set that who is me, who activated me function or class. And then that way on other clients, when they see the bullet and the collider overlapping and they get that, hey, you know what, my bullet's colliding, it's going to be like, hey, it's okay. That's the guy who fired you. Okay. Okay, so we're going to do that. And we're going to go back to our client. So make sure you hit Control S to save. I don't have NodeMon set up on this server for some reason. What are you doing? Cool. Okay, so we're going to say npm start and did all my changes and start. If you have NodeMon, you should just be able to hit Control S and save there. So we have the server started. We're going to go back to here, and we're going to go into under player. We're going to go into player manager. Okay, so we need to add in bullet data who the activator is, right? Because then that matches this. So we're going to go into F12. We're going to go to activator here. And just under ID here, we'll say public string activator. Beautiful. Okay, let's go back to player manager here. And under our fired function here, right where we define the bullet, we can say bullet.data.activator is equal to network client. And remember, we made this part static. So this allows us, no matter where we are, we can access client ID because it's a static property of the class. And we'll set the activator. Okay, cool. So the last step we need to do now is set the who activated me class when we create a bullet. So if we go to network client and we'll go to when we server spawn something, we already have a check for if it's a bullet. So the last thing we need to do is we need to grab in that new data that we're getting, right? And this is, if you're wondering where this new data is getting set, it's this return data in the server. We added the activator for it, right? So we're already doing a check for the bullet, and when we have a bullet, we get directional stuff applied. It'll now also have an activator applied. So we'll say e.data. Say activator. We'll toString this, and then we'll remove the quotes, just because sometimes it comes with the quotes. Okay, cool. So at the end here, we're going to do who activated me. We're going to bring in the gameplay namespace here, and who activated me. This can be spawned object dot get component who activated me. And this is what I was saying before. Like, this is a very generic class, so we can use it in the future for other things as well. And then who activated me dot set activator, and we'll use the string we just got, activator. Cool. All right, so we have our server running, we have our player running, and if we hit play and we wait for everything to compile, we now can fire a bullet and it'll detect some sort of collision and then get destroyed. And you'll see in server spawn objects now it's getting destroyed. Okay, so that's all fine and dandy. Let's bring our tank just over here, and we're actually gonna load in our second player. So we're just going to fire this up. Just like before, I'm using simple links. So if you guys haven't checked out that mini guide, make sure you guys do inside my channel. And that's how you can test local. Okay, so we're going to fire up this. So now we have our second tank. So if I fire the bullet, you'll see it fires, you'll see it collides, and if I fire the bullet at the tank, you'll see it fires, it collides, and in the future, we'll know it's a tank, and we'll be able to detect and remove health from it. And we can do that server side based on who we collide with. Okay, cool. And if I go to the other tank and drive him around, there we go. I can fire off a bullet and I can hit our guy as well. So it works both ways. And you'll see when I'm firing now, because we did that who activated, you don't see my bullet, even though it's colliding with my tank when I fire. You don't get that message because everybody knows who activated who. And that's basic collision for bullets, and it'll help clean up your scene. You won't have 300 bullets after a couple minutes of firing. And yeah, so that concludes our tutorial for part 6. And the next tutorial, we're going to start doing some health for the tanks and maybe destroying them, respawning, that sort of stuff. So if you guys are interested, make sure you guys stick around, leave a comment, like, that sort of stuff. And we'll see you guys next time. Just wanted to make sure I give a nice shout out to the people over on Patreon that help me support and help me do Twitch and YouTube tutorials. So thank you. And you guys will be in the following list. Jaren Frost. Hey everyone, if you guys liked the video, make sure you guys click that subscribe button, give it a like, and make sure to comment. It really helps out. And if you guys are looking to support the project further, I also have my Patreon, which will be linked in the description down below. Thank you, and have a good day.